name of the game today is attention grabbing. When it comes towards your prospects, they're being distracted, they're being pulled in 7,000 directions. But what can you say that's going to grab their attention, help them to recognize the value you have, and also to book an appointment and close business with you? Well, it's a tall order, but if somebody can do it, I know you can. In this episode, we're going to give you exactly what you should be doing to make that happen. Yeah. Check it out. Hey everyone, welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. On this episode, we have an amazing guest today. His name is Mr. Alan Versteeg, and Alan runs an organization called Growth Matters, where he helps sales leaders like you and me to be able to improve our games. But specifically, he wants to help us to help our sellers. And if you're an individual contributor, this episode applies to you just as much, because it's all around things that you can do to grab your prospects' attention. Specifically, in today's marketplace, when you go to market to try to meet a prospect and try to grab their attention, it is so difficult, way more than ever. What is it that you need to do? And we're going to give you some ideas. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be the ultimate guide or anything like that. We're giving you some concepts that you can apply. So check them out and let's see how you apply these things and how they can help you. Alan, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Good. Thanks for having me, Donald.
I'm looking forward to the conversation and especially looking forward to dive deeper into this, because the way we're seeing it right now, it's definitely more challenging than ever as a sales rep standpoint to grab your prospect's attention, to engage that person, and to help them all the way down to the finish line. And I'd love to get some of your thoughts and insights on that. But before we dive in, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing? Because I bragged about you in a teaser there a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. So we're a company called Growth Matters. We focus primarily on sales management development. We believe that without an investment in sales management, then no matter training, consulting, or technology really has a sustainable impact. Primarily because we need those disciplines in place with the sales managers. So with that rigor, or what I like to say, those tracks of execution, then everything you do on the sales enablement train has somewhere to go. But without the tracks of execution, it's pretty much stalled and trying to get out the starting blocks, depending on what you're trying to implement within your sales team.
I love this. And I go back to this idea that putting notes down that the management side, it gets neglected. I feel like sometimes we'll look at go back to you saying a consultant, or we go put our teams through a training process, but then the leadership is left to fend for themselves or to figure things out on their own. And then also middle management, like a frontline manager, I feel like is one of those hardest roles in sales, but oftentimes they're not getting that guidance, that extra support that they need. A top rep doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a top performing sales leader in that vein. So this is cool, man. We'll put a link down in the show notes so folks can get access to it. And this is why I thought this conversation made sense to have where it comes towards grabbing attention, because you guys are doing some remarkable things helping leaders, but also that you're practicing. So let's go straight into the meat, into this thing. I want to win the prospect's attention. Why is it harder to win prospect's attention first nowadays?
Well, I mean, everyone pretty much knows the reason. There's so many of them, but we're inundated with messages. We're inundated with distractions. We're inundated with people trying to connect with us on LinkedIn, or drop us an email, or send us a direct message, or run an advert. So there's always going to be a fight for attention. What's now making it even harder is generally you have to be pretty good at communication to get someone's attention. But now you can drop it into a ChatGPT or a generative AI tool, and you can put together quite a compelling script that's now going to sound like everyone else's. So the fight for attention is there, but at the same token, customers are dealing with challenges, dealing with frustrations, dealing with their own internal struggles, and they need the help we have to offer. But it's how do we get in there and how do we get their attention that's becoming so much tougher as it becomes more and more commoditized in terms of what good sales communication looks like.
So that's the golden question right now. How do we go about doing that? What should I be changing as an individual contributor to make that happen?
Well, the starting point is not going to be the one we're looking for, because we're looking for the 3 steps or the quick 7 steps, or the starting point is mindset. You have to realize that this is a profession where when you rock up, you don't get paid well, and when you show up, you get paid well. And the mindset starting point is, do you believe that selling won't help, but helping will sell? That you lead from a point of noble purpose, and that the language I use, the self-talk I use is, it would be borderline negligent to be denying my customer the value I have to offer. And I depart from the line point. So I don't see proactive sales calling as a negative thing. I believe it's a force multiplier. So do your proactive sales calling, do your LinkedIn, post, do your social reach out, do everything to try and get their attention. But it's got to start from a point that you believe you have value to give them. And the reason that's so critical, Donald, is so many companies are working what I call top of the pyramid. They're working on competencies. But I want to think about how we structure competencies. The first thing in sales is it starts with clarity of value proposition. So there's clarity. I know what the value proposition is. And so many times I'm working with leaders and they say to me, but my people don't know what the value proposition is. And then I ask the leader, what's the value proposition? And they don't really know. So you've got to have clarity. The reason you have clarity is clarity gives conviction. Conviction of the value proposition. I believe in this. I believe it has value to the market. I believe my customers need it. I believe that there's a problem out there that we put on this world to solve, and our organization is going to come solve that. That then creates an emotion. That emotion is confidence, and that confidence allows us to practice the competence. And over time is the only way you develop a competence. So if you think about it, entrepreneurs sell really well, but yet they've never been trained to sell. And that's because they have clarity and conviction of the value proposition. So it starts with the mindset. It starts with, how do we think about our value? How do we see the value? Do we really believe this? Or are we just dialing for dollars, hoping to find the next person that might have a heartbeat and want to speak to us?
I think that's where most people do fall into the category, because it falls into the role of I'm doing a job. If I do my job, then I'm going to get. If I reach out to enough people, I'm going to get some folks that's going to be interested. And I think in a very bull market, naturally that can happen. But in a bear market, when things are a little bit tougher, you're going to find that it's not that easy to get that. You have to come with that, like you said, that confidence and the competency. And I want to go back to the piece. Like I really do feel sometimes people listen to episodes like this and they automatically want to get that quick win. Like, give me that thing, Alan, that's going to really help me if I leave with the 3 pills that's going to make me successful. But the mindset, it was just so critical, like you're saying, to start off with. Because when you do have that conviction, like, and I guess that's the other part too, like, I can't tell you, like, sometimes people see, like, I tell them I use LinkedIn and they're like, well, how do you do it? Like, I can't necessarily, like, tell you every detail that I do. I know I want to get in touch with Alan. So then, therefore, I go out and I try to do the things and I need to get his attention. I'm going to do it creatively. I'm going to look for stuff that matters to him. I'm going to look for things that's important. Where is he? What avenue is he at? What things is he paying attention to? And see if I can go that route. And again, that's the mindset component. But if I tell somebody, like, you need to go on LinkedIn, you need to connect with Alan, you need to find something personal about him, they're going to go and do those. It's almost like an empty, a soulless body. Am I making sense on this?
100%. So people follow the recipe, but they don't have the ingredients, right? They haven't the ingredients, that mindset, that intentionality, that research. That I use a different word. I call it stalking my prospects. Long before I'm communicating, I'm stalking them, understanding what they're talking about, what interests them, and I get my ingredients together. Once you got the ingredients, you got the mindset, and you got the meaning you want to bring to them, then you can follow a method. And I think in this world we try to jump to method. And it starts with, what are you trying to do here? What's your ingredients? What's your model that you bring to that? And then you can follow that method. So there are definitely methods that work, but just following the method is like following a recipe without ingredients. If the ingredients are poor quality, you're not going to get the outcome you're looking for.
Oh my goodness, it's so good. What else can I do to make sure that I am grabbing the person's attention? I know when we first connected, Alan, we talked about this idea of relevance and how important that is. Do you mind speaking to that for a little bit here?
100%. And Arnold, because it speaks to the neuroscience, but I want to start with what you've said. So I was saying that relevance is the currency of value, and we forget.
One more time for the folks in the back. One more time for the folks in the back. Say it again.
Relevance is the currency of value. So you have to intentionally engineer relevance into your conversation. You can't leave it to chance. And that's why I keep saying this is the best paying hard working job. But if you think it's just rocking up and you can just, like a good singer, grab the microphone and go, you got to know your audience. You got to know who you're trying to speak to. You got to understand the challenges they're facing. And not because you're trying to manipulate, because you're trying to find where the relevance sits. Because we're triggered by relevance. You think about this. You look at a group photo, who's the first person you look for? Why do you look for yourself? Because the most important thing to you is yourself. Then when it comes to value, you look for the things that are relevant to you. And then once you understand that, you do the research. Then I've got the tactics for you. So you have something called an initial value promise. And it says, I've recently been working with people like you mentioned their titles. I've recently worked with sales directors in the pharmaceutical industry. So use the industry. And just that opening sentence, I've got your brain's attention. Let me tell you why, Donald. Your brain has something called reticular activating system. It's designed
Oh, yes.
designed to protect your brain from too much information, so it finds out what's important. So, for example, you go buy a new suitcase because you're tired of looking for your black suitcase on the carousel. So you go get a turquoise blue one, like the color behind you, and you go, wonderful, now I can find this easily. You get to the next airport and your brain sees all these turquoise suitcases and goes, where did they come from? Like, where did this happen? Meanwhile, your brain's not paying attention. So when we use relevance, just relevant, think about what I just said, opening statement. I've been working with people like you, like industries like yours. When I say I've been working with sales directors in the pharmaceutical industry, if you're that person, your brain goes, hey, wait a minute, that's me. And then I go to who have been trying to achieve something. So I talk about their goals, who have been trying to find a way to drive sustainable sales performance, but have been struggling to, regardless of the investment in sales training. And if that triggers in their brain, and then I go, we've helped companies get a return on investment from their training by developing their managers. And then here's the golden question. Is that something that's relevant to you? And you only have three answers, Donald. You get yes, tell me more. You get no, which at that point, don't try and convince them. So thank you so much for your time and move on, because they made it clear that the value proposition you're bringing forward, initial value promise, is not there. And then finally, you get, you know what, Al, it's interesting what you're saying. I don't think our problem is really the sales training. It's more around the fact that we invest and they go and start talking to you. And now I'm in. But salespeople are trying to find a simple way in or a lazy way in. You got to do the research. You got to be on the LinkedIn. You got to be connecting with them. You got to see where they're at, and you got to be picking up that phone. My friend, if we invented the telephone after email, we'd all be calling each other.
I love it. There's power in that phone, in the picking up that phone. I can attest to that. I've utilized the phone in many different ways and gained some decent amount of business from that. And to go back to what you're sharing, even at the very end, is that relevant to you? I like that. And more importantly, from the start of our conversation, you started talking about value proposition, essentially, around that idea of the value statement, or you could give that. And I still love how you married that with where we're talking about that relevance, and how that is literally tying back to that value. And I feel like, when there's something that in that part you just shared, but being willing to walk away when somebody says no. I think sometimes we feel as sales professional like, gosh dang it, they said no, I need to push through and just make you say yes. And it's like, well, if it's not going to fit, it's not going to fit. And you don't want to waste your time on it. You much rather, focus on the people that are going to be a fit. And then the other part is that idea of that statement, describing it in a way that looks like them. It's awfully simple, but oftentimes we go back to human nature and behavior. Like you said, we picture ourselves in that picture first. We are going to picture that what they're saying ties back to me. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't sound like it ties back to me, I'm not going to do it. And I'll give you one. When I sold software, we sold a document management system, and we created an electronic filing cabinet for them. So we literally just created a filing cabinet, and they could store all the documents digitally. But this is way before Dropbox, right? But what started to happen though, when we would show people these filing cabinets, if we showed an HR director a filing cabinet that said finance and invoices and accounts receivable, all of a sudden it felt like they were lost in a foreign country. They're like, that's not the way ours is. It doesn't work. And I cannot tell you how many opportunities that I fumbled at the beginning because I figured it's just a cabinet. We could change the names, but it wasn't there. So therefore, they're saying your company can't help my department. Am I making sense on that?
100%. I mean, I have my own story of that. When I started selling sales training many, many years ago, before I got into sales management, I used to have a really good success rate with sales directors, but I'd have a really big success rate with the human resources department. I used to call them the human assistance department, because I'd maybe get a 1% success ratio. And the reality was my message wasn't relevant to them. And what you're touching on is so important. I mean, I'll give you a fresh story right now. So we hire an external SDR company going to help us create some appointments and leads. We sit with their team and we talk them through our initial value promise, how we talk through it, the research that's required, everything that's happening. And week one, they're saying, oh, by the way, we did 253 calls. I said, okay, great. How many appointments you get? No, none. I said, okay, but then we've got to check the script. Go back to the script. They're using their old standard script. I'm saying, guys, this doesn't work because you're not engineering the relevance. Rather go low and slow, find out where the right people are, connect through the initial value promise. These are big companies I'm trying to target. And the next week, I said, how's it going? They said, really well. We did 400 and something calls. Great. We're getting appointments? No, we're not getting appointments. Okay, well, what messaging we use? No, we're still using old messaging. We're not comfortable with the other one. It doesn't feel authentic to us. I said, well, your messaging.
Oh my goodness.
And they literally fought me. I mean, this is my expertise. They fought me as my provider on my, and eventually, obviously, we had to ask them to move on. But the metrics, that's another big thing in sales, Donald. The metrics are flawed. I mean, when your metrics are only, are you getting the dials out? Then why are you expecting your salespeople to go do research and planning and targeting and all these other things when you don't value that in any metric? You value the metrics that are actually, and this is the best way I want to say it, without offending anyone. If you tell a salesperson, look, if you make 100 calls, you get 2 sales. So if you need 4 sales, do 200 calls. What you're saying is, you suck 98% of the time. Go suck twice the size of the audience. Right? Why are you doing it? And what you're doing is you're demolishing the sales profession because you're creating that barrier, that resistance in the reticular activating system that says, that sounds salesy. That sounds like you're trying to get something to me. And they just build these walls up and keep bringing us in later and later in the buying cycle, often making the wrong buying decisions because we're not entering in the right way. We're damaging this profession because we're just going, let's just load the shotgun and hope. We've got to care about the person you're trying to connect with. If you start there, so many other things fall into place.
Oh man, and the fact that you're talking about the RAS2 reticular activating system, even better. We partnered with an organization and we did some stuff around reticular activating system back in the pandemic, and that's when I got introduced to that term, and I was like, no, like mind blowing. You know, just being able to understand how our brain works makes you so much more effective in a position like this in the sales. And I realized there's so much more of that mental side. And what you're sharing here too with
your mind. It's the bodyguard at the door of your mind. It is what allows attention in or out. And either that bodyguard's not going to let you in the club, going to throw you out very quickly because they realize you're getting salesy, or they're going to give you a VIP treatment into the club. And to do that, we have to, to your point, I study a lot about the brain. We've got to understand the brain, messaging and how that works. But effectively, it still comes one layer down. If your intent is pure, because Donald, here's the rub you have to be aware of. The neuroscience of persuasion is the same neuroscience as manipulation. The only difference is intent. The only difference between persuasion and manipulation is intent. When you lead with that noble intent, that noble purpose, then you can start to get really skilled at bringing that persuasion forward. But if you don't do the work to be authentic in your interest in their success, then you're just running through the recipe without the ingredients.
I love that, man. So good. There's what else do I need to know as an individual contributor if I'm gonna break through that noise and grab that attention of those prospects? Any other insight that you can share on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the terminology is military terms. Always remember force multiply effect. So you don't just send the troops into the army. You do certain things. You do intergalactic missiles first, and then you do stealth bombers, and then you do drones, and then you do your tanks, your helicopters, and your ground troops. And that force multiply effect increases your chances. I think the challenge is when we're targeting a big international logo. Lots of people can say no to my initial value promise, but I don't try to contact one person in the company. I don't worry about going over people's heads because all I'm trying to do is create value for the organization. But to do that, I've got to realize that there's got to be a multi-pronged approach. They can't go into LinkedIn and I've got nothing smart to say about my profession. They can't be going to Gartner and saying that we don't have high rankings. So I do a lot of that work to make sure that I create that personal brand that says, hey, this is someone I want to work with when they do go and research you or stumble into you. So that's the one thing. The other thing I would say is that you've got to be honing your message all the time. Because the message is now going to be AI engineered. It's going to be smart people doing smart things. We know that social media manipulates us already. It follows your feed, it tracks what you're doing, serves up certain content. So those algorithms are already built into machines, and it's not long before that algorithm knows how to get to that right buyer. The question is not going to be that moment. It's going to be, do you have a relevant story to tell at that time? And if you're relevant, listen to you. Because the other thing is, I don't want to have 17 appointments and I get no follow-up. I like a 1 in 2. I like 1 in 2 calls get me an appointment, 1 in 2 appointments get me a progress, and 1 in 2 progresses get me in the pipeline. And then I know I'm considerate in my approach. And I think with technology, we've moved to high tech and away from high touch. And I believe that AI, customers are going to trust us less because they're not going to know if it's authentic. So authenticity, preparation, that right mindset, the human differences are going to start to matter even more, including emotional intelligence, ability to read a room, ability to care about someone, ability to listen to them well. All these things have become key points. So there's not one thing. For me, it's research what's happening in their world and find an authentic, relevant message to bring to them. And structure it in your way. Be yourself, but be someone with noble intent.
I love that. Be someone with noble intent. Be yourself, and structure it around that relevancy to them. This is amazing. If folks are listening to this episode and they're like, Donald, I got to get in touch with Alan. I want to learn from him. I want to connect with him. What's the best way for them to go about connecting with you?
Best way, I've got a unique name, so you type this name into LinkedIn, Alan Versteeg, and you're going to find me into any search engine. So lots of podcasts, lots of content on my LinkedIn. The company's Growth Matters. The best place to go to is becausegrowthmatters.com, and they'll find a whole bunch of things there. And I think that's where they can find me. And I'm passionate about this. Although our focus is sales management, why you and I connected, Donald, this is the key thing. I'll just take one point. This disconnect between sales and marketing, it floors me. Because marketing in the center of marketing is, imagine a Venn diagram. It's connect, converse, and convince. How do we connect with our audience? How do we converse with our audience? And then how do we convince them? And in the middle is your value proposition. And so many organizations spit out marketing material which is disconnected from what the salesperson thinks the conversation should be. Or the conversation is so far removed from the marketed value proposition. Or we have a good marketed value proposition, we have a good sales conversation, but then we can't help the buyer through their journey. Because remember, selling is not a one-call game. You're helping a buyer navigate this complex world. So you've got to bring these things together around messaging. How do we connect, converse, and convince our key customers through a core value proposition? And I think companies are focusing so much, Donald, on the methodology. And don't get me wrong, some really good organizations out there that focus on this. I think Corporate Visions is one of them. Business value selling, this is their key area. But the point remains, it starts from where you come from. Otherwise, you're just following a recipe.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Second time you said that. We got to put that in the show notes. Listen, man, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. Thank you for your insights, and thanks for your wisdom and helping us elevate the game.
Thanks for having me, and I hope your audience got value.
100%. I'm telling you, Alan knows what he's talking about, man. He knows what he's talking about. I had a really good time talking to him, and I really want you to go ahead and connect with him. You can find him on LinkedIn. His stuff's in the show notes. And as you can hear, he emphasized relevance so much. That's a big word for us. That's an important word. I always talk about that because you got to be relevant. And if you're trying to grab the prospect's attention, you got to make sure that value tied back to that relevance, as Alan talked about and succinctly tied up. It was so good. So apply this stuff, and I promise you, you're going to stand out. It's not just a one-time fix. It's not do these 3 things and all set up. You're not only getting a recipe. You got to make sure you understand these ingredients, as he would share in that episode. Man, money in the bank if you do this stuff right. As always, I want you to thrive. I want you to succeed. Check out our sponsors. They're giving you amazing things that you could take advantage of, and I want you to benefit from it. I want you to succeed. I want you to raise your level of thinking. I want you to go out and do big things. Check it out. Thanks so much.